I know you talk to a lot of people from the car industry, from the automotive industry. Can you see how they tackling these challenges? Is there some examples that you see or some trends that you see how they do this, or they more or less ignore it and try to stick to the old way of doing things?
The car manufacturers, the OEMs, are very decidedly move towards these new directions. They try lots of new things. They build up, for instance, these new centers for also software development or for IoT solutions, and try to build up this kind of competence. And also with tier one companies, one can see that quite a readiness for change and for innovation. With tier two companies, the classical suppliers, it's a bit more difficult. Yeah. So there you could see more attentive attitudes, and they are insecure, not necessarily knowing in what direction they should know or they could actually move. Yeah. And so here it's difficult to say. I mean, you cannot really advise such a company to say now from a typical mechanical expert doing components, you should transform into a software developer. This will not really work. It's rather the question where you can bring in your mechanical competences in a new way in this new world, because still car chassis have to be built. There are still some hardware needed, and also in the manufacturing processes. If we speak about the robots, for instance, yeah, there you have also lots of high precision mechanical devices you need. So also battery technology I mentioned before, where you maybe could introduce also lots of mechanical competences and knowledge. Up to recently, they were used to buy in various components from different suppliers, and these suppliers and very much hardware oriented. So I buy the hardware, the software comes by the supplier as well, and then I'm handling dozens, if not hundreds, of different suppliers with different standards and software solutions, and then you know better than I do, you easily run into problems when you try to synchronize these different systems.
Yeah. The integration piece becomes very complex.
Yeah, it's become over complex. Yeah.
If the OEM has not the software competence, then it's always the question who does the integration.
They were not really aware of this problem. They became more and more aware over the last years.
Coming from, let's say, the software development right in Softeq, also with probably more from the consumer electronics rather than the automotive in Softeq, right? We see, and I see that what I see in the car is really like the early 90s or so, maybe if you're lucky the late 90s, in terms of the interface, how the software is built, how the interfaces are built for the user. I think that's a big problem.
Yeah.
Because the user, as you said, right, everything is changing so fast, and what the user gets used to is their phone or maybe their computer, right?
The big topic or a big example for that is, of course, the whole issue of over the air. And I just read that also Volkswagen, they are very ambitious now for the future, that they want to make all the software updates and upgradings and so forth over the air. And but at the moment, for many manufacturers, this is still not possible, or still poses a lot of problems. Yeah, but that is of course what customers expect. Exactly this. Yeah, I download this app, I update the newest software on my smartphone. Why doesn't it work with a car like that? But I think the major problem was really that the car manufacturers themselves, they didn't understand the problem. They were not really aware of the problem. They said, okay, we integrate this, integrate that, very ambitiously. and not understanding in what kind of new problems you're running into. And only now they start to understand that. And also, what they didn't understand is possibly that this is also a major front on which you can really present yourself as a brand and to make the difference to your competitor. Yeah, and that this is really a selling point and therefore needs to be kept in mind. So I think that is changing now. That is behind this new strategy of building up their own software competences and departments in the company, especially in relation to head units, because that is the interface to the customer.
It brings us a little bit back to the expectation of the end user, which we see also in Softeq in other areas when we develop products, that the demand of the end user has changed dramatically. When it was previously, you get a product and then you use it for, depending on the life cycle of this product, like for 2 to 10 or maybe 20 years, as is, right? And now it's more a process. You buy a product like, let's say, the iPhone, and you assume that you get updates with new features.
Yeah.
And I also read for the Tesla, it's criticized a lot for quality issues, but what the users like, beside, let's say, the status, and that's something new and fancy, they like that the car itself is improving. And this is what the software allows, right?
As mentioned before, you have this two-tier development velocity. Yeah, like a car still, because you have to go to build the chassis and all this and all the hard stuff, and you have to test it and so forth. That takes years and is not that easily changed. But you have to design everything around it, and within 2-3 years, zack, the whole electronic inner life has changed and the reality has changed. Yeah.
But the good news is that the user interface can be changed more easily than the chassis. So basically, you can use a platform that
Yes.
can change in their own kind of cycles, but you can then adapt the user interface in a more frequent way, at least from the software perspective.
That's exactly it. Because even now, I mean, it's no problem, to have a 10-year-old car or something like that, different to like 30, 40, 50 years ago, when that was really then an old car, and the whole chassis was already decaying and rotting and whatever. That is no longer an issue. So you have a perfectly nice car if you keep it nice, uh, 8 years old, 10 years old. But what about this electronic inner life? Yeah, that has certainly changed. But what you mentioned, that is certainly the future. That is where the OEMs are heading for, to exactly have this kind of platform, which is it must be, of course, as flexible and open as possible, so that you can update it over years to come. Yeah.
That could be one answer to also sustainability questions, right? Like, okay, you use the car for 3 years, but you could use it for 20 years, basically, from the technology perspective. So it's a huge waste of material if you use the car only for 3 years, right, instead of 20 or 30 years.